Hi, everyone. Our subject today is about fighting in Islam. Now, Islam has been criticized and attacked through centuries, uh, mainly about some verses of fighting and probably by conquering, consequently, or later on by conquering and so on. But actually, Islam does not need violence because violence was attributed to Islam as the first reaction. Rather, it needs an understanding of it and a listener who does not deceive his or her heart and does not fancy his conscience. And if this is, I mean, if this is it or otherwise, Islam does not need violence at all. No place for violence in the message of Islam. Rather, we say more that the message of heaven that began their journey on earth did not resort to violence in establishing servitude to the one God and in rallying people on his straight path. Since the first message of the first messenger, Noah, coercion was ruled out as a path to educating people or bringing them into God's religion. As Noah said in verse 28 of Surah 11, O my people, see if I have a clear sign from my Lord and that he has sent mercy unto me, obscured from your sight. Shall we compel you to accept it when you are averse to it? Now, this more or less the same message, I would say, in Muhammad time, in verse 99 of Surah 10. God is speaking in the verse like this, and had your Lord, O Muhammad, that's what it means, and had your Lord willed, those on earth would have believed all of them together. So will you then compel mankind until they become believers? God is telling Muhammad, if I wanted everybody to believe, I would have done that. I don't need you to do this for me. Now, the ultimate meaning of all this is in verse 29 of Surah 18, which says, and say the truth, O Muhammad, or whomever, you addressing to the listener, and say the truth from your Lord. Okay? Whosoever wills, let him or her believe, and whosoever wills, let him or her disbelieve. So clear. But on the other hand, we have to ask the question, was the position of the rivals, the adversaries, or the enemies of Islam neutral or positive, or was it always negative? Of course, negative, surely it was. This is why fighting verses came to exist, but all of them in defensive propositions, like the verse 190, 190 in Surah 2, which says, talking to Muhammad and the believers, and probably to everyone else, and fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but transgress not, for Allah likes not the transgressor. The transgressor. It's obvious how peaceful it is, nevertheless, the message. Now, which was this verse in particular? It was the first of such verse to be revealed. So, as we say, the title of Islam about this subject is peaceful from the beginning. But after denying the right to Muhammad to deliver his message, and after persecuting him and his numbered followers, and blocking unto them the means of living, and after hurting them physically, forcing many of them to fled and migrate, and even there they were annoyed, offended, and attacked numerously by their intertribal Meccans, and especially relatives, for the only reason of monotheism, which means for the only reason that they believe in one God, Allah. Two verses governed and regulated the issue. They are verse number 216 of Surah 2, which says, fighting is prescribed for you and you dislike it. Please imagine and listen carefully. Fighting is prescribed for you, which means sometimes you have to fight. And you dislike it, but you don't like it. It's not something that you wish and desire and so on. It means in self-defense. Another verse that is number 178 in Surah 2, which says, O you who believe, prescribed unto you is retaliation for the slain, retaliation for the slain, which means you were in a scenario whereby you were attacked. So it's prescribed on you to retaliate, to return back in offense, or return the offense back, actually, okay, to the offender, and so on. But listen to the fairness in this. How the free for the free, which means, if, in the sense, if they hit you on your left hand, hit them on their left hand. The free for the free, and a bondsman for a bondsman, and a woman for a woman. Yet unto whomsoever is pardoned by his brother, then a serving of payment with kindness. That is an alleviation from your Lord and the mercy, so whosoever shall transgress thereafter will be tormented. Look at the other part, the second part of the verse. It says, like, if you forgive the one who killed, let's say, your brother, by compensating you some certain amount of money, then accept it, which means there's no encouragement for continuous fighting or killing or whatsoever. As for the wild verses of Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9 in the Quran, which is virtually the last revealed surah that explains the lingering of the messengers and believers' patience being exhausted after many infractions and breaching of treaties and agreements by the Meccans and non-believers, necessitating putting an end to all this unacceptable attitude. So God ordained no more treaty to be respected anymore and gave both Meccans and other non-believers a 4-month period warning, during which they have to think, rethink, consider, and reconsider. After which, fighting and chasing them will be the order, as the first 5 verses of Surah Tawbah say, not forgetting to avoid frictions with those who remained on their words, on their deal, on their agreement, and did not betray or played around with the messenger and believer. Even more and better yet, look at this, what the verse number 6 said after issuing the warning for 4 months, and and that there will be fighting unless you redress your attitude and repent and so on. Verse number 6, look at this, how beautiful it is. If any one of the pagans, or the Meccans that is, if any one of the pagans ask you for asylum, ask you, O Muhammad and believers, for asylum during the war, that is, or during the fighting, grant it to him, so that he may hear the words of Allah. So grant it to him, grant the asylum for him, and let him hear the words of Allah. And then escort him to where he can be secure, and let him feel that he's safe. That is because they are men without knowledge. Since they ignore what Islam is, of course, they become, aggressive to Muslims and believers and so on. But once they understand Islam, they cannot keep the same attitude on that. So, this is a big chance to repent. Should they show a sign and win down life here and thereafter, all these verses were and still misunderstood as to how God restricted the fighting as explained above in those verses. Misunderstood, and which means understood wrongfully, unlike what we just explained in how fair it is and how tolerant afterwards and things like that. The reason for fighting all the polytheists, is that they fight all Muslims because the Meccans, let's say, they were attacking the Muslims and the believers. So these fightings were ordained and prescribed in self-defense, kind of. Hence, it is not permissible for a Muslim to fight whoever did not fight him, except with a clear, valid cause, such as plundering or usurping the rights of Muslims, or because of inflicting injustice on anyone in public, that is. As well, because of preventing Muslims from peacefully delivering the message of Islam. One of the reasons those fighting verses came to be prescribed is because Meccans were preventing Muhammad and Muslims from calling to Islam, delivering the message. As for other misunderstood verses in Surah Tawbah, I point out verse number 29, which represents the topic of fake aggression and savagery, pretended so by those who really misunderstood it or who wanted to understand it differently in order to distort Islam, instead of reading it carefully and interpreting it correctly every interpreting correctly every word in it, and avail the understanding of what it means rather than jumping to conclusions, fueling animosity and hate. So let us read together this verse that explain, let's read this verse and explain it and understand it correctly by understanding the meaning of the key words in that verse that we are going to read. The key word that is vouchsafe the book. In Arabic, it means الذين أوتوا الكتاب, because there are three different terms related to the word books in the Quran. أهل الكتاب, الذين أوتوا الكتاب, و ومن عنده anyway, there were more than one term using the book. The one that we know the most is أهل الكتاب, right? People of the book. In this verse, God utilized the word utul kitab, utu, it means were granted graciously or given the disclosure of the message, of the information of those messages in detail to someone. Those someone or someone people are those who believe in it. More information comes to them, which means those who already believe in God and in the day after and so on. Utul Kitab, okay, in English translated to vouch, perfectly translated to vouchsafe the book. Those who actually the definition of it is those who know the truth and gave up on it. Okay, they gave up on it once the message of Islam was to be delivered to them, which is in conformity with what they knew already, and not necessarily or exclusively who know, people of the book, as I just said, as commonly is familiarized. So the verse said, verse number 29, yeah, verse number 29. It says, fight against those who believe not in Allah. Okay, listen to this, not finished. Nor in the last day, and those who hold not that forbidden which Allah and His Apostle have forbidden, and observe not the true religion. So fight those who have this bad deed, let's say, or this bad attitude and so on, from amongst, that's what the verse said, of those who have been vouchsafed, from among those who believed already and have the knowledge, but they refuse it now, coming from Muhammad in the name of Islam. That's what it means. Until, so fight them, okay, until they pay the tribute out of hand, which means to pay like taxation, and they are subdued. And then they will be, let's say, paid in return or safe or something. Why? Because if they want to live within the community of Islam, practicing citizenship and enjoying rights against duties like any other worldwide society, they have to pay. And we do, as immigrants all over the world, uh, we do pay tax like the local citizen. Becoming citizen, that's what it means. So, if there is a religion that needs violence in order to impose its teaching on people, this religion is not Islam. If there is a school of thought that exploits material superiority or military capacity to impose its principles and spread them east and west, then this doctrine will not be Islam. Islam is a religion whose foundation is an innate, inside it, coming from inside, innate mentality, okay, which finds its way easy to the hearts, paving the way to those of intellect and knowledge, which means it needs someone with an intellect, someone who can understand, to really understand its message. Thank you.